Hi, how are you? Matt here from SuperCard. Welcome to today's video. What I'm going to be doing is showing you footage of me completely finishing up and building out the front end of the Gallardo. So basically the main thing to do is to build and fit the front trunk lid and get that opening and closing properly, and yeah, front will be done. So let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut two of these mesh grill inserts for the front bumper. I'm going to cut them out of 210 GSM light card, which is like heavy paper, and I've spent several days cutting them by hand. When I made these, I didn't actually have my Cricut Maker automated cutting machine, so I had to spend an insane amount of time just cutting each individual hexagon by hand with my craft knife, which is kind of crazy, but you know, it had to be done. They had to be just right. So yeah, there's one, and I repeated the process all over again to make a second one. Once they were cut, it was just a matter of carefully fitting them to the front bumper, and they just kind of slot and sit in place. I used tweezers to help me get them aligned just right. And there was also a small piece for the center of the bumper too, which I cut the same way by hand and fitted. The front bumper was then complete and ready to be fitted to the car. So I made it fit in place with large tabs on each side of the lower front guards, and the profile of the bottom of the bumper matches up exactly with the shape around the front of the subframe or the under tray of the bumper. So there's the front bumper all fitted up. Nice. Next, I'm going to build the front trunk lid, and here's what the finished thing looks like. As with every other part of this model build, I've documented every part in Adobe Illustrator. Here's a quick look at how I've set up the individual pieces and their relationship to each other in my file. What I do is I print off each part, use those prints to trace and cut out every piece from the various materials just by hand with my craft knife. Here's a complete set of parts that I've made for the trunk lid. The first step of the construction process is to overlay a printout of the trunk lids in a frame piece. And what I'll do is just go around with the point of my compass to put marks through to the cardboard part underneath. And those marks will act as a guide as to where I need to glue each of the trunk lid's structural components. To make it easier to see where each part should go, I'll just go around and connect the point marks with my pencil and ruler. Now I can start adding parts and building up the structure of the trunk lid, starting with this 210 GSM light card part. Next, I'll add a series of foam core board structural parts with PVA glue. Where possible, I'll weigh the parts down with something flat and heavy, like a book, to prevent the structure from warping and curling up as the glue dries. And also to make sure the parts dry with good contact between the parts. So you can see how I've constructed the internal structure and how I've designed that for the trunk lid starting to come together. And these structural parts will give the trunk lid some form and strength that it needs. Now I'm going to roll the outer body panel parts over something cylindrical, in this case a spray can. Basically I'm pre-shaping the piece. If I don't introduce some curvature to the part, like this first, and I just bend it as I glue it onto the trunk lid structure, it'll create too much like tension through the trunk lid structure, and it'll want to warp the whole thing. So I'll keep rolling it just till it holds the exact shape of the trunk lid structural formers, and then I'll glue it on. This will be the surface that my outer shiny black foil board panel piece will attach to. I'll repeat the same process for the other outer panel sections of the trunk lid, like so. Now I'm ready to attach the main shiny black foil board outer panel piece. I'll just use a small line of PVA glue along the front and rear of the piece. I find that if I used like any more glue than that on the outer body panel pieces, they end up looking bumpy and they don't really dry and set smooth. So the outer triangular sections of the trunk lid need an extra layer cut from 210 GSM light card, and this part has a series of tabs along one edge. I'll glue the outermost section of the trunk lid to those tabs shortly. I'm gluing the outer body panel pieces to those triangular tab parts now, using a small line of PVA around the edges, again so that they dry smooth and not bumpy. Next up, I'll add a bunch of badge, ID tag and info sticker details to the trunk lid. And to make these, I sourced photos of each badge and sticker from a real Gallardo online, and I just sized and cropped them in Photoshop, and then printed out in high res on photo paper on my A4 color printer. The Lamborghini badge needs to be touched up with gold round paint around the edges, just to cover up the white paper edges. And then I'll carefully glue it in place with super glue. Next, I'm going to paint the two gas strut attachment brackets black. I've cut these from wooden ice block stick. And once they're painted, I can glue them into the two slots that I've cut into the cardboard base of the trunk lid, like so. Now I'll glue the front latch striker plate to the underside of the trunk lid's front edge. Then I'll glue a small dot of black card at both front corners, and these represent like the rubber stoppers that would prevent the trunk lid from making rattling sounds when the car is driving on the real car. Also on each corner, I'll insert a small length of toothpick. I won't glue them so that I can move them in or out slightly, and it gives me a way of adjusting the height of the trunk lid slightly up or down so that I can get it sitting flush with the front bumper and guards. Now it's time to carefully glue in place all the stickers, labels and other small details that I've replicated from the real car that I made earlier. Once they're all glued on, this is how the detail of the underside is looking. And here's how the top or the outer side is looking. Next, I'm going to make 2 gas struts. The first thing to do is roll up a rectangle of 285 GSM silver metallic card to make a cylinder. I'll roll it tightly around a length of bamboo barbecue skewer and glue the end to prevent it from unrolling. Once the glue is dried, I can just carefully remove the skewer, and there we go, that's the cylinder made. So I need a way to attach the gas struts to the car, and what I did was I just drilled like a small hole through one end and glue in a piece of toothpick, and it kind of makes like a bolt. Once it's dried, I can snip the toothpick down to the right length using my little side cutters and just reinforce it with a bit more glue. Final detail is to add a little end cap of a tiny round dot of black paper just to make it look a bit tidier. And the other component of each gas strut is the actual strut itself, which will slide into the cylinder. I'll start by making the end which will allow the strut to attach to the body of the car. And it's just made up of a short length of clear plastic tube that I've cut from a Q-tip and a short length of toothpick. Then I'll super glue the bamboo barbecue strut itself into that and paint the whole thing silver. I'll also paint some black details like this. And finally, I'll add a small washer that I've cut from cardboard to the end bolts and then slide the strut into the cylinder. And that's one gas strut done. The process for making the other one is exactly the same, of course, and there they are, both finished. Now I'm folding up 2 small brackets, which I'll glue onto each side of the trunk area of the car, and these are what the bottom of the 2 gas struts will attach to. The gas strut cylinders are now ready to be attached to the underside of the trunk lid. And I can also attach the struts to the brackets that I made a minute ago. Once that's done, I can finally attach the trunk lid to the car. First, the hinge brackets press into slots that I've made in the bottom of the trunk lid. I'm just making sure they're pressed in all the way. Then I make sure the gas struts are inserted into the upper cylinders. The trunk lid should then open and close pretty good. At first I'll just close and open it carefully once or twice, making sure that everything is aligned and functioning properly. And once I'm sure that everything's good, I can apply some glue to the top of the hinge bracket so the lid won't come off when I lift it up. The reason I've left the edges of the trunk lid exposed like this until this point is so that I can access the tops of these hinge brackets and apply the glue. It just means that it will be out of sight once the trunk lid is finished. So the trunk lid is now properly fixed in place, and I can go ahead and fit the last few pieces to finish it completely. There's a structural piece, a tab strip, and final outer body piece to assemble and fit it carefully in place like this. And as this final edge piece dries, I'm just going to carefully keep checking and making sure it's conforming correctly to the curvature of the top of the guard, so everything lines up good. And that's it, the front end is complete. So yeah, it took several months of work in my spare time to get the front end to this point, but I think the work was worth it though. The build is looking super nice so far. To open the trunk lid, I designed a special system where you reach under the front bumper, push up on a little lever, which lifts the lid just enough to get a finger underneath it, and then you can continue to lift the whole lid carefully into its fully open position from there. So yeah, there we go, that's the front end of the Gallardo all completely finished. Looks really, really good. Next week, what I'm going to be doing is building and fitting the 2 oil coolers, so make sure you check that video out. And yeah, as usual, if you've got any photos of a build like this that you're working on yourself, I'd love to see what you're doing. Or if you've got any questions about this build, don't hesitate to email me at matt@supercardmodels.com, or you can just DM me on Instagram or Facebook, etc. So yeah, thanks for watching and see you next week.